Hello, and welcome back to How to Change the World, the podcast that provides the lessons, tools, and inspirations for changemakers so that you can drive meaningful impact. I am Catherine Alonzo, and today I'm joined by Steve Diasio. Steve is an innovation expert and influencer who supports aspiring leaders, innovators, and changemakers like you. He is the founder of the School of Creativity and Innovation, where he crafts training on cutting edge innovation methodologies, design thinking, and disruptive business models. His boot camps, sprints, and trainings encourage individuals and organizations to critically examine their surroundings and envision a more innovative future. Steve shares in this conversation so much insight into what innovation is and how it can truly shape not only the world that we are creating, but our day-to-day experience of doing that work. I think everybody engaged in social change needs to hear this. And so without any further ado, my conversation with Steve Diasio. Steve Diasio, welcome to the podcast.
It's an honor to be here, Catherine.
I am so excited to have this conversation and really grateful to you for taking the time. So, jumping straight in, you describe yourself as someone who studies how the future is made, which I think is so fascinating. What first drew you to that question?
Great question. Having been the last 20 years in higher ed, I got to work with a lot of students, if it's undergraduate, graduate, and even executives. And they're always hungry to be able to craft the life that they want. We funnel them in certain directions based off of curriculum and what we think they should learn and what the outcomes will be if they get a job. But what I saw was the desire to empower or to be empowered to create your own future with confidence, with the tools, with the know-how to do that. So this was like the spark that said, well, how do we create curriculum or opportunities or experiences that allow that individual to see themselves bigger, to go out in the world with confidence and to create the life that they want? So that's what I saw in the classroom, and it kind of resonated with me because these are the types of experiences that I had in my own life. And I think more and more people are looking for different avenues to find fulfillment than some of the similar tracks that they've been kind of educated on or told to follow.
And I'm really curious, Steve, how your own story and your experiences have shaped your work. How do those two things intersect?
I was very fortunate at a young age in college to study abroad in London. And I was one of 2 Americans out of 60 students in 40 different nationalities. I was a fish out of water. I hadn't traveled. That was one of my first times abroad. And the level of diversity was incredible, and it helped grow my mind, my eyes, my heart, and helped me see the world in a way that I wouldn't have been able to before. And the people that I met, they were coming from all over. So we were on this common path to better ourselves, to have an adventure, to meet new people, and to grow. And that kind of laid the foundation because that provided me opportunities that I wouldn't have had because I was leaning in, taking, I don't know if I would call it risks, but adventure and figuring out where to live, what to do, how to get by along the way. And that was my first experience living abroad, which kind of gave me this satisfaction and joy that never left. So after moving back to the US and seeing a lot of changes that were happening at that time, not so different than what's happening now, I felt that I wanted more because I only had one life and I wanted to make the most of it. So then I left the US again and moved to Barcelona and lived in Spain for 5 years. And this was a whole different adventure, but something similar. Making your own way, enrolling people in your vision, meeting like-minded people, learning from the level of diversity or people who are doing something different in different ways, and growing from that. So that empowered me to feel comfortable to deal with change, complexity, or anything that life throws at you. And these are some of the same tools that I teach at the School of Creativity and Innovation.
I really love how you share those experiences, and they really resonate with me on a personal level. I first moved to the States from the UK when I was 22. And that was when, I really realized that there are these really significant cultural differences between the two countries. And I wasn't expecting that because I had been so exposed to American culture and TV and music. that I thought I knew American culture, and I thought that, English speaking country, fairly similar to my experiences. Moved here, found, that there are just these big differences. And that's when I learned that culture is made up. And if culture is made up, it means that you can change it. And it's not easy to change it, but it is possible to change it. And that, I think, was really formative in my professional journey and my own passion for making change in the world, because if there's one thing I believe that it is infinitely possible to make change. So your own story just really resonates with me, and I'm really curious then how your journey, I guess, between being in Barcelona and founding the School of Creativity and Innovation.
So prior to founding the School of Creativity and Innovation, I have been providing a lot of training in higher ed. And the students were constantly hungry. We want more. We want to unlock our potential. We see that these skills and tools that you're providing, either in creative problem solving, I use a lot of improv to break down a lot of silos or assumptions that we have in if it's organizational culture, team culture, or society, and suspend that using these different tools to see what it would look like when we don't have those stigmas, when we don't have those assumptions, when we don't have those power structures. Other tools that I use are around design thinking or the tools of innovation, which is a process which is focused on divergent and convergent broadly, but then there's also a set of tools that can be utilized in teams, organizations to launch new products, create new services, to enroll people in that vision. So it was through these combinations of living this experience, both living abroad or the challenges that I faced in my career, but also refining the curriculum and tools in a way through my experience in higher ed to be able to deliver them through the School of Creativity and Innovation, which is more immersive. Where in higher ed, we generally think that we're testing content, here are some quizzes, here are some multiple choices, but it misses some of the kind of experiential and immersive learning. And everyone today is looking to be in that situation where they forget about their stresses, forget about their worries, and they can be present. And in these immersive experiences, they're able to not only do that, but build bonds and build skills and see how it relates to their individual situation, their professional situation, maybe their organizational, and the goals that they want to achieve in life.
And who is the School of Creativity and Innovation for?
We focus on designing immersive programs for early and mid-career professionals and change makers. We help them with the skills and tools needed to thrive in their career. This is a new environment that we're finding ourselves in, where a lot of those repetitive tasks or common-based tasks that we early entry people would be focusing on are being replicated or being taken over by AI or automated or being outsourced. So the human skills, the human potential, I'd say the creative side, the communication side, the team building side, all of these are deeply human, or what I frame as the human experience that yet can't be replicated by AI, and where we'll need to lean in order to make sure we are crafting the life that we want, personally and professionally.
And I know that one of the core central theories of your work is the jam band theory of innovation. I'm so curious to ask you about the jam band theory of innovation. What is it and how do you use it?
Oh, thank you for that. This has been an ongoing mission of mine. As an academic, we're expected to do research, we're expected to publish, and I was fortunate enough to spend 3 years with IBM and their Innovation Jam platform. And this is a unique model for innovating. Generally, we think of innovating happens with teams, but this was 300,000 people participating to solve the world's largest business and societal problems. Before the advancement of technology, we couldn't have 300,000 people in a room. It'd be just chaos, even if we could find a place to do that. But with technology, we've been able to allow more voices to be heard. So it's a broader platform. And one of the things that was unique about this was that, one, they found that large group of people can collectively organize to solve challenging business and societal problems better than individual experts or groups of experts. But the analogy that they were using to drive and create this platform was the music genre of the jam band. So this helped create this opportunity and rabbit hole for me to go down. And I've had a few opportunities to publish some work around jam bands, the metaphor, and help us understand the complexities of innovation today opposed to innovation in the past. So the jam band theory of innovation focuses on a few topics. We'll say one around openness, where anyone who knows will say the Grateful Dead, they were very different than a lot of other bands. They didn't have a top 10 hit until the 80s, and they weren't regularly played on the radio, or they weren't making their money selling records. They had a whole new business model where they would tour and do the live shows, and they did 300, we'll say, a year. So they had a very different business model than the traditional industry business model in the music industry. And this notion of openness is all around that type of business model. They allowed people to freely use their intellectual property, which is a very different notion than command and control of what we see in terms of business, or even Taylor Swift. She's locked down everything and she's trying to extract all the value and money she can. But Grateful Dead had a very different approach about giving away. So people would allow to record their own music, or we'll say through the AV system known as tapers, and then share that, which helped build more community and enroll more people into this jam band music genre, but also subculture. So the notion of openness is embedded within this jam band approach that is very different than some of the traditional views of innovation that might even use the metaphor of jazz. So for instance, the jam band is all about collaborating, where you're including diverse actors, or having people come on stage and play with you. Or the Grateful Dead, for instance, they had women, they had people from African American background playing with them in the group. And in some pictures, if you watch, you couldn't tell where the band started and where the audience began. So the notion of where does innovation happen, or where does some of the sparks happen? Historically, we thought it was always internally, meaning if we think of IBM or even Xerox, historically, it was that person in the basement or in the laboratory creating that. They were a scientist, they were a PhD, they were doing some sort of experimenting. And that might have been fine in the old paradigm of the world. But we're finding in a very different, complex world where we believe that ideas can come from anywhere that can create value. So for instance, think of it like this. They grew from a very small band playing in San Francisco to playing massive stadiums. But at that time, there was not audio video equipment that they can go out and purchase like you could today. Or there wasn't technologists or companies that could put that system on today. I've been to a U2 concert. They have this massive structure, but they're using sound engineers, designers, and all these other things prior to even go on tour. But the Grateful Dead did that themselves. They saw what was out there and brought it back and built the wall of sound. They also incorporated instruments from the African history and the music that they use in different parts of the world. They incorporate in their music. They use a lot of improv, and they pulled from not just one music genre. They pulled from blues, jazz, reggae, folk, bluegrass to create this whole new music genre. So the idea of where knowledge and information can come from to spark new, we'll say, value, or to create new products and services, the jam band theory answers a lot of questions that are missing in some of the outdated paradigms.
Thank you so much for walking that through for us so beautifully, Steve. And so what I'm hearing in terms of the jam band theory of innovation is that some of the core concepts include, you mentioned openness, collaboration. Sounds like inclusion and improvisation are really core and central there too. What I want to ask you is, how has innovation changed? Because in your answer, you talked a lot about how the Grateful Dead and other bands like them were doing things differently than had been done before because times were changing, things were different, technologies were different. And so how do you think innovation is different today because of this very fast moving hyper technology world that we're living in?
Great question. I think what's happening is the tools and barriers to innovate have been reduced significantly. The cost has reduced significantly. So the company or the person who had the money for CapEx, which is a term within bigger organizations of what they do for spending for growth and experimenting, that cost has gone down significantly. So now we have a lot more startups able to build things faster, cheaper, and quicker. We can have individuals testing the market to get more feedback. So the tools of innovation, we'll say these technology tools, have reduced significantly. And because of the internet and many other complementary tools, individuals are able to quickly iterate faster and with smaller steps. And now we're seeing that there's significantly more markets out there as a result. So I would suggest innovation is more collaborative. You are identifying knowledge from a diverse set of groups of individuals. We are also moving toward a shift, what we frame around called human-centered design. Prior to that, it was the engineer or the innovator in the back thinking that they knew best. And if you remember early VHS recorders, right? In the beginning, there was just like 3 or 4 buttons: play, rewind, record, or something like that. But then it advanced and there was like 30 buttons. You never knew how to use the VHS recorder. It was because it was over-engineered. It was over-designed. And the person designing it was that engineer and the technologist in the back, but not thinking about the end user. Thinking about how my mother would use it, who now, you've seen the universal remotes. Why are there so many buttons? What do they all do? That's being over-engineered. So now we're focusing more on understanding the customer through empathy, through different, we'll say, research techniques that maybe weren't being used to the same extent in the past. Interviews. Now people, of course, run these advertisements on the different social media platforms to see who would be interested. They can do that cheaply, where they couldn't do that before. Or it took a long time to interview 100 people. Now we can get people through different filters to understand who our customers are, what they want, what resonates with them. So I would suggest the costs of the tools to innovate have reduced. At the same time, through education, other individuals have the skill sets to implement some of those tools with a new focus on understanding the customer better through different techniques of empathy building, human-centered design, interviews, a lot of the social science research that can help us inform and improve our product and idea faster, cheaper, and better.
Well, and what I'm really hearing is that because of those changes, the barriers reducing and the access increasing, who the innovator is has really changed. That the innovator used to be this person in the back, figuring out the technology and the buttons and all those things. And now the innovator can be anyone. And I'm thinking back to your analogy with the Grateful Dead and how they used to perform music, and you couldn't really always tell where the band ended and where the audience began. And sort of imagining kind of the social change maker as the innovator, which I don't think is always a way that people working in social change identify. And so I think that's a really important mindset shift. Along with that mindset shift, what does that, if I am the innovator, what does that then look like, Steve, on a day-to-day basis? Innovation, I think, is a buzzword sometimes, but what are core competencies, the skills, and the daily tasks associated with being the innovator?
Wonderful question. And I would suggest the School of Creativity and Innovation offers training on some of these. And these would include creative problem solving, communication, we'll say research in terms of identifying your problem. Because if you don't have a narrow problem and you're not becoming a subject matter expert and you're not able to communicate that effectively in a way that's resonating with that end user, that end customer, then you're kind of off target, or you're going to spend more money. It's not going to be efficient. You're going to just have to work harder. So certainly this notion of creative problem solving, we don't often get taught how to problem solve in a way that is most efficient, we'll say. Business students, I see it in the business school, we're trained to produce one right answer. So first, maybe we want to ideate, come up with as many options as possible. And you would ideally want to do that with a team. Because what one idea someone has, regardless of how ridiculous it is, it might spark an idea that's relevant for the other individual. So what would that look like? I would suggest, as an innovator, having a team or having a support group around you that helps push or help you think differently or ask questions and prompts. And I would assume even AI can help you do some of that. You have to know your problem. You have to do extensive research and be able to communicate that effectively and know who your audience are. So some tools that we teach are maybe stakeholder mapping, persona building, journey mapping. These are all tools that I use within the design thinking design space. But in terms of communication, I would argue that there's a whole set of power skills that an innovator needs regardless of where they are. We in education don't put enough emphasis on effective communication and team cohesion or collaboration. So those would be some more skill sets around what it looks like to be an innovator and how that happens on a practical level.
Well, and it sounds like, therefore, innovation isn't a category of things you do. It isn't something you put on your to-do list. It's actually threaded through kind of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's another good example. We watch a lot of movies that have Justice League, Marvel. Those heroes, the hero's journey is very similar to the innovator's journey. And the idea that you have been awakened, you have now a mission. You might have to clarify that mission. You might have to refine your skills. You might have to understand what the problem and the challenge is. And are you willing to really accept and commit to that and walk across that threshold? And then you will have trials and tribulations. You will have friends that you will meet. You will build a team, and you will have foes who won't believe in your idea. Will you persist? Will you refine your own skills and overcome those challenges to meet your goals and return back to and go from this current status quo world, creating this special world, and then creating this new, better world through this journey? So I see the hero's journey and the innovator's journey as being very similar, regardless of where you are personally and professionally.
What do you think are some of the things that people get wrong about this idea of innovation?
There's a lot of innovation theater out there. One thing that I see a lot of in my region is they mistake innovation with just outcomes. So we have a whole bunch of things going on. 10 things didn't succeed, but this one thing did succeed. Oh, that was innovation. I'm not sure I would frame it like that, because then anything that succeeds, you're framing as innovation. So there's a lot of innovation theater. One misconception is what innovation is. And this is challenging and complex. So the definition of innovation can change depending on the context you're in. At the most basic level, it's creating value from ideas. And if I'm an entrepreneur, we'll say it might be top line revenue, sales, could be helping a customer. And in the social change world, it might be creating a better quality of life for X, Y, and Z, creating more equity in this area. Whatever the definition is, you can have different ones. And then how you're creating value in that context. So there's not one definition to innovation. It is context dependent. And so that definition can change. So if you're not focusing on what it is for you in your context or your industry or your company, and you don't have a clear vision, and others around you in your company don't have that same vision, you're going to be working in different directions. You're not going to have that outcome or value or impact that you want. So having a clear understanding of what innovation is, which would be different than your mission, different than your vision, or maybe even different than your goals. You might be able to create value for inequity in many different ways, right? Toolkits, awareness, education, money, whatever the case it might be. So you can define it. And then you might want to have short vignettes or summaries of what that could look like. It doesn't have to be exact, a bit abstract, so you are not confining yourself to one specific outcome or view of what success of innovation is. It's back to that idea of ideating and being open and wide to ideas. If you have a good idea and view of what innovation is and your team views it, you might be able to create movement and momentum around things that you didn't expect before. So I would say that is one of the biggest challenges around those trying to implement or misconceptions around innovation, is that it's context dependent. The definition should be tied to your situation, not what Microsoft says, not what Steve Jobs says, but your context. And it's okay to change it as long as everyone else you're leading or working with understands and views it the same.
Well, what I love about that, Steve, is then it really frames innovation as this incredibly flexible tool that can be utilized and maximized in the context within that you're in. So what I love about you evoking Microsoft and Steve Jobs, just to use Steve Jobs as an example, especially in the tech and the corporate world, is sort of held up of this idea of what innovation is. And it can be difficult sometimes to frame something like the creation and evolution of the iPhone into social change contexts, whether it's fighting for access to education, serving people who are unhoused, whatever it might be. And so what I'm really hearing in your answer is the Steve Jobs of it all is an example of innovation, but it's going to look different in your context, in your work. And so how does somebody go about figuring out how innovation is defined within the context of their work and their team?
Great question. This is a lot of reflection, refinement, and how it ties to your mission and goals. So for instance, if I'm sure you have a strategic plan, you have objectives and goals that you want to meet, you can think of innovation as being a catalyst. What type of tools and platforms you want to use in order to be able to create this value to meet those goals. To think about it as ways to create new types of value and what that would look like and to whom. So mapping out who your end customer is, what their motivation, their outcomes, their goals are, tied to your goals, tied to the processes that you're using in order to create these new ideas, processes, products, and services that you're delivering. So I would refine it as, is the big value prop that you're bringing to your end user or your customer and not being tied to the traditional ways of thinking of how that value can be created.
I think that's really profound. I love this idea of thinking about innovation as a way of creating value from ideas. And so then the question becomes, what is the value you're creating? And that is a different way of saying the same question, which is, what does innovation look like in your team? I just love that. I want to ask you about the future and how we think about the future and how we move toward it. But let's take a quick ad break and then we will be right back. It is such a tough time for nonprofits, agencies, and changemakers. Funding is tight, capacity is stretched, and your work matters more than ever. And you need communication support that can keep up. That's why we are super excited to introduce our new suite of modular, flexible services, built to help you and your storytelling stay visible, resilient, and connected when it matters the most. Whether you need a quick messaging refresh or adaptable on-demand support, Javelina is here to help you move forward with clarity and strength. You can see this list of services and discounted prices at javelina.co/rapid-response-services. All right, Steve. So first of all, let me ask you about how you think about the future. So when you imagine a better world, what does it look like for you?
For me and in my space, it's about empowering individuals to follow their dreams and to create their own desires. So what I see in my students and in professionals and executives, often they don't have the skills or they're not feeling empowered to make the changes that they want in their own life. So for me, when I see my students taking their passion around music, even though they're an entrepreneurship major or a business major, and taking that music and transforming it not into a career in music, but using that as a lead generator, because now they have thousands of people following their work on SoundCloud, on the different platforms, but creating a whole new vertical where it's about wellness and sobriety and grounding, and it's their music, which was their creative outlet that people were following and resonating, and being able to create a business that's helping our community around topics around sobriety, health, wellness, yoga, meditation, cacao, you name it. And now you have a community that is taking steps in their own lives to find like-minded people, to be environments that support the lifestyles that they want. So for me, that's a wonderful example of an individual who said, all right, well, I have a hobby, but I can't make a career out of it. And maybe I don't want to make a career out of it because that's where my creative outlet is. But what happens if we use that as a way to create a new path for our future? Another example would be this. I have a student who was making short vignettes on YouTube about how to live minimalistically and sustainable in the dormitory. Created a mass following on YouTube, ported that into Instagram, started commercializing her Instagram, was named sustainability role model for the company Ariel, the company who owns Abercrombie and Fitch, Hollister, PacSun, using her art. So she would take trash and make these fancy dresses, not to wear, but as symbols of what we're doing to our environment. So this is an individual who was good with video, public speaking, know the life of a student living in the dormitory, what they can do, and then parlay that into using her art to be a sustainability role model. And now they're an ambassador for sustainability for Merrill Shoe Company. This is not a career path that you will find on LinkedIn. This is not a career path you will find in a textbook. These are individuals who leaned into their skill set, believing in themselves, using the tools of creative problem solving, of enrolling people in your vision, communication, community, collaboration, to create the life that they want. Mm-hmm. And I believe there's a lot of people out there who have been kind of corralled into certain career paths or situations that they no longer resonate or want to be in, but are afraid or don't know how to get out of them. And these skill sets that I focus on, which I believe are fundamentally human, which we've extracted basically out of large organizations, and we're just kind of an extension of the machine, finding those, reconnecting with our creative self, reconnecting with our ability to improvise. Life is a series of impromptu moments. Have we been practicing those skills? It can open the door wider, or if we miss the opportunity, it'll close. So are we practicing those skills to be able to create that life moment by moment? So those are some examples of how I see impact and change happening in the world and what I want to see more of on the individual level.
Well, I'm grateful for your work in the world because I think that it's so relevant to social impact and social change makers. There is definitely this sense within social impact sector that it looks a certain way and it involves a certain career path, it involves certain activities, wins are defined a particular way, and with the changes in technology and remote work and expectations being different of the younger generations, I see this incredible opportunity, just incredible opportunity for social change to really grow with us expanding the definition and being able to recognize that creativity and innovation and all of these different career paths can be a part of social change. When I graduated college, I was told you can make money or you can make a difference, and you have to pick which path. And it took me longer than I wish it had to realize that was terrible advice. And, I chose making a difference. It wasn't even a choice. But for a long time, I had this narrative in my head that if I was making money, it meant I was not making a difference. And that's just one example. But I think there are all these paradigms that we think about is, if we're doing a certain things, if social media is a significant part of our job, if we are content creators, we're not social change makers, because social change makers are in the streets and protesting and wiring themselves to buildings. And so I think these expanding these definitions is got to be so important, because if the definition is expanded, then more people engage in social change work and we go further and achieve more.
This is wonderful. I frame it slightly different in my area. We call it citizen innovation or citizen innovators. So for instance, I work with a lot of city governments with my students to come up with new solutions to problems that the city is facing. And this goes back to, let's say, this new paradigm of innovation. Who would have thought that the student knew where an idea for solving a local social problem could come from? But we know that we can not only rely on government or the top down coming from, but in fact, the bottom up will create many more solutions. And I completely understand and remember being told, either make money or you make a difference. And that's not the case. The tools of innovating are all around, regardless of what you want to solve. And if this is being a social change maker or a citizen innovator, uh, these are similar, or if not enough the same, to make a living and to make a difference. So we're breaking these paradigms and we're breaking these myths, both if it's innovation or social change. And maybe there's a strong overlap. And I already know there's a strong overlap because these tools are helping create change. And that's the definition almost of innovation: creating values from ideas, not doing the same thing over and over, dealing with the problems and challenges that we face today, which are different.
Absolutely. I find this conversation so inspiring, Steve. I really do. Okay, so what I want to ask you is about the tension between imagining a bold, better future and dealing with the urgent day to day realities, which I think is something that people deal with in leadership in every sector and every job, and, paid, unpaid, family, professional, whatever it is. Just this idea of working toward a bold, better future and just the reality of this day to day stuff that needs to get done. How do you think about that tension, and what advice would you have for people in social impact?
If you're suggesting how is it the day to day within the firm, or as an individual struggling and thinking that they want to go in a different direction, but they have obligations?
Yeah, I think it's more the individual and just that tension that exists between I
Gotcha.
have these bold dreams and I want to innovate and I want to create a better future, and at the same time I have this to-do list that needs to get done.
Yeah, you've already been in a path. You have to pay your bills. You have to do certain things, but you want to. You have this other passion. I would say start small. Think about what skill sets you have, what you bring to the table, what is unique about you. And I can guarantee everyone has some uniqueness. That doesn't mean you don't have to refine skills. That doesn't mean you don't have to think about it. But where can you make the biggest contributions based off of the strengths, skills, and talents that you have? And that may be very different. I gave the example before. The person made music, but that was just a lead generator to create a vertical festival, an all day festival around wellness and sobriety. So, what you might be good with or good at, and the skill sets might not be the value that you're creating, or the company that you're creating, or the initiative that you're creating, but it might be tied into helping people funnel into your idea. So think about what those could be, right? When you're starting any type of adventure or initiative, you need to have one clarity on if you really want to make that effort, because it's a grind. It's a marathon. So you first have to convince yourself, this is what I want to do. And the best way to do that is to, one, go talk to other people who are already doing something similar, saying, hey, I would like to learn from you. What can I learn from you? How did you get there? What tips would you have for someone thinking about doing something different or in a similar light? What were the pros and cons, trials and tribulations? Go interview, go meet them for coffee, become best friends. So I think that's the easiest and low hanging fruit that one can do. Go talk to others who are maybe a few steps ahead. I would say that would be the easiest to do, is go talk to like-minded people saying, what would you do differently? And what advice would you have for me if this was a direction that I wanted to follow? Next, think hard about if this is really what you want to commit to, because anything worthwhile is not easy and it's a marathon. So you're always going to have to start small and test. Test being, for me, I was getting so much positive feedback in the classroom. They're like, we want more, Steve. So I started running free workshops to see if people would be interested in the type of training that I thought was needed to a much wider audience than just what I was doing in the classroom. That gave me feedback, and other than a flyer, asking some good friends, reaching out to people, a few hours plus the preparation to build that workshop might, whatever, 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it takes. And then running it might take another hour, recording it, digesting, reflecting, getting feedback. So now maybe you spent 10 hours and you're like, all right, well, if I were to continue taking this, so it's a pilot, it's a prototype, it's a test, it's getting feedback. This is the fastest and cheapest way to know if you're in the right direction. And then go talk to people, which is another form of qualitative research and getting to know your end customer and getting to know a support group.
Yeah, it sounds like the process of finding ways to innovate more is to build innovation into your day to day. Like those day to day skills, you get better at it by practicing it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and you always have to be putting yourself out there. So, for instance, if you've been working in this career for a long period of time and you want to do something different, well, By definition, you're going to have to lean into yourself to be able to do something different, to whatever that looks like. If it's a flyer, if it's content creation, if it's going to the local chamber meetings or different events, that's putting yourself out there. I would also suggest creating assets wherever you go. Those assets might not be things that you always put on social media, but it might be ways for you to reflect, seeing your own progress. Journaling, I think, would also be a great tool in order to help you understand the direction you want to go, your value prop, what's motivating you, a way for you to kind of evaluate the work that you're doing. Maybe there's other ways to get involved with something similar opposed to starting from zero and saying, I'm going to participate and learn from this type of community and seeing what's going well and what's not, and then learn from there. So there might be only time investment.
I think that's really helpful. And I think, for a lot of people I know have this sense of there's something else they want to be doing, there's something bigger they want to be getting up to, and just making that shift is really difficult. So I appreciate you giving us that tangible advice and guidance.
If I can give one more, volunteering, right? So if you think you want to focus in this area, go to a place that volunteers in the related area. Learn, give back. You will get so much more feedback, and it'll help those wheels turn even more and help ground you in the next step you need to do. It benefits society. It benefits whatever community you want to reach. Plus, you're learning a lot about it as well. And now you're starting to build that community.
Right. Exposure to ideas, exposure to people, also confirmation that it is actually the right place for you and something that you're interested in.
Yeah. Maybe you want to tweak, because maybe you're like, all right, well, in the local level, these are the challenges, but I see the playground that I want to play might be on the state or the national level or in this context, in this niche. And I think that the narrower you are, the more likely you're to succeed, because you're able to identify those specific end users much better and speak their language, and it ties to your own motivations and your own passions. So if it's journaling through that, reflection, volunteering, small steps, I think go a long way to helping you feel comfortable and empowered to take that next step.
That's great. Steve, I'm so grateful for your time today and everything you've shared with us. I want to ask you, when it comes to creativity and innovation, what is a different way to think that our audience can try out?
I would suggest that individuals can utilize creativity to think differently around possibilities. Think about scenarios instead of outcomes. So we have to remove these boxes, framings, models, walls that we have in our own thinking that don't allow us to get to new places. And if you do this in a group, it's even more dynamic, because that will spur the next idea that may be more relevant and more relevant. So I think if you're looking to problem solve, make an effort to take some time, reflect, go through some sort of ideation phase, and start with the premise that no idea is stupid or too big, because that will help spur new ideas that you would never be able to get to. So we're starting to remove those boundaries and inhibitions or models that we have. Another idea I would suggest is think about how you as an individual are creative. What do you do in your life that's creative? And then we'll say what creativity is many things. So again, list those ideas that you're going to find out that you're actually way more creative than you probably give yourself credit for. So now you start seeing that, well, I'm creative when I do crafting. I'm creative when I do content creation. I'm creative when I dress myself. I'm creative when I walk my dog. I'm creative when I'm driving to work or school. And now we start seeing that creativity isn't something that's so far away from us. We see that it's already embedded in us. So we're getting over that myth that we have. Oh, I'm not creative. I didn't go to art school. I'm not creative because I can't draw. So we're breaking those myths down. So find ways that you are creative. So first you're identifying your creative self. Then you're identifying your creative environment. And then you might want to think about the creative process. What creative process do you use? Do you have a process? Do we just jump to conclusions? Do we just jump to the end and pick one right idea? Or do we have a process of divergent, convergent again, and ideating and refining or researching broad and then refining that research and coming to a specific problem or solution. So what is the process that we actually use in our organization, in our teams, and in our individuals? And my guess is we probably don't have a process. So you might want to start thinking about what exists, what's out there, how can we formulate our own process? And then the next thing would be products and services is a input and output of the creative process. So diverse inputs equal diverse outputs. So if you're not gaining a lot of information that's diverse from wide audience, from different groups and different places, that's going to impact your output. And even the tools we use. Writing is very different than typing. Reading is very different than video. Those impact our creative processes if we know it or not. And I'm not saying one is good and one is bad. We need a range of tools. And think about what's relevant for us. What are our skill sets? What are the strengths and weaknesses of those around us? That right there will help create a base that would allow us to take that next step or to improve our own creativity, or where it should direct our initiatives, our strategies, our tactics, and where I should be spending my time individually.
Steve, thank you so very much for just everything you've shared with us today. Finally, what is the best way that folks can connect with you?
Great. I look forward to connecting with everyone. Please feel free to reach out to me either through LinkedIn, Steve Diasio, or you can find more information about tools, guides, and creativity challenges that can help you level up your creative problem-solving skills at the School of Creativity, or www.theschoolofcreativity.com. This is an easy entry point that will allow you to see what skill sets are out there, opportunities to grow. And again, there's a whole community of like-minded people who want to change the world and make the world a better place.
That's great. Steve, thank you so incredibly much.
Catherine, this has been wonderful. Thank you.
There you have it, another incredible conversation with a fantastic change maker. I just took away so much from my conversation with Steve. I really enjoyed him talking about his jam band theory of innovation and understanding the ingredients that make that special. Openness, being open, sharing ideas, open sourcing the things that we're working on, collaboration, really sort of jamming with the people around us and working together for better solutions, and that improvisation, bouncing off of what exists. Not everything's planned, and being able to pivot and build as things unfold. I also really took away that he said innovation does not equal outcomes, or what he said was oftentimes when we think of innovation, we think of what innovation creates instead of the process of innovation. And I think that might be the idea that sticks with me the longest. I think we talk about innovative systems, innovative programs, innovative outcomes, but really thinking about innovation more being about the inputs and how we're doing the work. And that leads to different, better, more outcomes. But the innovation is really baked into what you're putting in rather than what you're getting out. And I thought that was really profound. I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation, even a fraction of how much I did. And if you did, I would love if you would do two things. One, send it to somebody that you think might need a little bit of inspiration in their week. And two, leave us a rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. We are just so grateful for the input, the feedback, the collaboration that we get from you, the listener, and we want to keep it going. So thank you so much for helping us do that. And until next week, when I cannot wait to share another story of change with you, have a great one.